They're always the bad boys and the bad guys somewhere. And it does feel that, there always clashes in culture, in language, in your mentality, and only, certain countries with, let's say, stable and good social and economic backgrounds, that are more civilized, can live side by side. But when it comes to the media, that sells really well.
Hello and welcome. This is Ruta Naujokaite, and you're listening to Lithuanian Dream Podcast, a podcast exploring ideas about contemporary Lithuania, a relatively small country in Northern Europe that regained its independence 30 years ago. This week, we launched our new website, LithuanianDreamPodcast.com, where you can go and sign up for our newsletter. So you will receive our podcast episodes as soon as they will be released straight to your inbox. Today, the power of PR and communication. Julija Jagorova is the founder of global PR company, and she has offices in London and Vilnius. Therefore, we will be talking about how communication is being used on a country level, Brexit, Lithuanian startups, and the perceptions of other, both in UK and in Lithuania. Hello, Julija. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
I invited you to our podcast because you work with PR and you work in between two countries, Lithuania and UK.
I read somewhere, and that was a while ago, I'm not sure whether that's exactly true, that 1 of 8 Lithuanians is living in the UK. But it's either still true or the stats have changed a little bit. But I assume also, obviously, COVID and whatever is happening right now is influencing the statistics. And I do feel that a lot of Lithuanians are slowly coming back to Lithuania. To be honest, a lot really depends on the level of education and the area of the UK that you actually live in. So I think most of Lithuanians live in London. They have really good education, they have fantastic careers, they're excelling in what they do and they're being praised for that. Same goes to our, manual labor workers. Lithuanians are known as very hardworking people, who get things done. But I do think that, as I mentioned just now, it really depends what kind of part of the UK you live in and how people perceive you. So in London, I don't feel that there's any difference in attitude towards foreigners in general. But unfortunately, of course, there is resentment towards Lithuanians, as there is resentment towards any sort of immigrant. But that is mainly, with people maybe with lower education, or, maybe they were just having bad experience. So that really, really depends. I've been living in the UK since 2009 and London since 2013. So that's 7 years and counting now. It's such a huge pot of cultures and languages and people, and it's absolutely fantastic. That's why you feel you regardless where you go. But also, I think when it comes to London, it's really important to find your place. So some people like, West London and South Kensington and Chelsea. Some people prefer a little bit more hipster areas like Shoreditch. But I think what is beautiful about London, that anyone can be whatever they feel they want to be without being judged. Having said that, in 2016, when Brexit was officially happening, and I remember that day crystal clear right now. So Brexit was announced on Friday. That was July. I don't remember the date exactly. And obviously, every single newspaper, the cover was, we're getting out of the Europe, the European Union, taking back control of our country, blah, 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 blah. And I was going, I think, to a meeting or to work in the early hours. And I was sitting to a gentleman who was quite well dressed, probably in his early to mid 30s. It looked like he was going to the city, so some sort of banker or financial analyst. Looked like a very, smart guy. And I was reading a newspaper about Brexit, and he asked me, so what do you think about Brexit? All of a sudden. And I've told him what I think about Brexit, which is clearly nothing, constant like, hey, we're getting control back. And regardless how many years I lived in the UK, I still have an accent. Maybe people can't really pinpoint where exactly I'm from, but I still have it. I like it. I'm not going to be getting rid of it. And once he heard me, he said, well, you should go back to the country where you're from, to Italy. And I was like, okay, well, if you feel like I should go, to eat some pizza pasta, I'm definitely up for that. Just buy me a one-way ticket. And that was probably the only time when I felt a very personal, I think, hit. But, I couldn't, it would be weird if I would be extremely upset about that. So I tried to make it into the joke, though, later I found out that some of the people I worked in the company, which was heavily British, some of them who are my age, so in the late 20s, also voted for Brexit, which for me was absolutely baffling, because it seemed that only, people in the late 60s to 70s have voted for that. So that was probably the only time when it did feel I was not welcome there.
So why do you think they voted for Brexit?
Well, Britain wants to have its glory back. It wants to have its empire back. But that, once again, it goes down to education. If you are not educated enough, if you don't really know what benefits immigrants bring to the country, how, once again, this melting culture pot that is extremely beneficial, it's very hard to say why people voted for it. Some of them, as I said, voted to get our country back, our laws back, which is just a ridiculous topic, full stop. Some of them just had very bad experiences with foreigners, because, some of the areas of the UK heavily kind of migrated with immigrants. And I think that's what a lot of people don't like, for whatever reason. Some of them have stereotypes about what we are. But I think also it goes down to the newspapers that we read, the news that you absorb on a day-to-day basis, and that really doesn't matter which country you're in. Because if you're a huge fan of, let's say, the Daily Mail, the Star, or any other kind of yellow press, where you see every single day, immigrants are coming here, taking our jobs, killings have been happening, it's on the rise since someone moved somewhere. And of course, if you've been not necessarily force-fed that information, but if you've been reading that since you were very young up until you're very old, without having any other view, you will think that everyone's really bad. Same goes to the fact that if you're reading, I guess, a little bit more objective news, so the big three, The Guardian, The Telegraph, and The Times, listen to BBC, where they at least try to be a little bit more objective, because they talk about the fact that immigrants do bring a lot of money into the British economy. I personally always pay all of my taxes, so saying that we're just taking all the money, we're living off on benefits here, is also really ridiculous. But that is people's perception, and the news that we read help to perceive the world, and how we see it.
Why do you think these tabloids try to marginalize new groups or smaller groups of people?
But it's been always like that, right? Since history, they're always the bad boys and the bad guys somewhere. And it does feel that, there always clashes in culture, in language, in your mentality, and only, certain countries with, let's say, stable and good social and economic backgrounds, that are more civilized, can live side by side. But when it comes to the media, that sells really well, right? So bad news, unfortunately, in the media is good news. If you can blame someone for your misfortunes, that always works. Blaming, Brits themselves, it's not as fancy as blaming someone, who came here. So yeah, I think that there's, there are different reasons, but predominantly the reason for tabloids is because it sells, right? So they still have, I think, page 3 or page 6 where they have naked women there. So you would think that probably is not the best way, to treat a lady, it's talking a lot about objectifying, but then again, that's what sells.
And what happened now after Brexit is done? Is it still happening that, the foreigners are being blamed for things, or it's switched and there's a new group, or how is it going?
Now it's coronavirus, but that's being blamed for absolutely everything. To be honest, I think because Brexit has been going on for what almost 4 years now, it's kind of losing its newsworthiness. There's that many people that you could have blamed. There's that many horrible news and front pages that you could have produced. On the funny side, though, one of the reasons, and one of the biggest tabloids headlines was, foreigners coming here taking our jobs. Then they've proposed that you should have points-based system like Australia does. So you need to have certain education, certain level of language, and I don't know, another like 15 things to make sure that you're up to a certain level, to come and work in the UK. And of course, a lot of low-skilled people, or low-skilled, that would, that sounds extremely unfair, but those who are picking fruits and actually doing the dirty job, you might say, and providing to their families, they felt extremely unwelcome. So a lot of people left, and the idea was that these seasonal workers would become Brits, the ones that are on benefits, the ones that are say, we don't really have a job, what shall we do now? And what I read in the news is that not a lot of them wanted to do this job. And it got to the point where the British government, I'm not sure who exactly, they decided to bring, I believe, Romanians via, chartered airline to the UK during COVID, when, people were not really traveling far, simply to do the work. So that's kind of raising a lot of questions. Why did that happen? But to be honest, as I said, if you read better, more objective news, I don't know, the Times, BBC, you see that, for example, Lithuania is being portrayed quite positively, especially in the past couple of years. I think we definitely upped our game. We're known as a fintech hub, so Vilnius, Lithuania is the second after London, which is a huge deal, I think. So we're competing with the likes of Germany, France, and Spain in terms of fintech. Our Christmas tree, it was also all over the news recently. The G-Spot campaign was also welcomed extremely nicely. So I think slowly the whole perception of what Eastern Europe is starting to change, and Lithuania is definitely doing a really good job at it.
Yes, and PR is being great for Lithuania nowadays, and it gives the face to the country. So
absolutely.
What is the face of Lithuania in your eyes?
We have a lot of faces, which is great because we have obviously fantastic tourism. So that goes kudos to the municipality of Vilnius. The G-Spot campaign was their baby, and it went, viral absolutely everywhere and was really, really well perceived. Then we have, I guess, a little bit more serious, so fintech and business, where we explain that Lithuania is perfect for doing business. It's perfect for startups to flourish. Because let's say in Lithuania, to get a banking license for a fintech startup, I can't say it's much easier, but it's quicker than, let's say, getting it in the UK. And we have the likes of Revolut, getting banking license, which is a huge deal. Obviously, when it comes to investment, people love investing in Lithuania. We have so much talent and so many things that we can offer. We're still quite a young country, right? So we're just around 30 years old. We're still trying to find our ways and how to do things. But I think in terms of, tourism and business, that was quite well defined. And I think that moving forward, we'll find new angles how to do things. The fact that Lithuania is small, just less than 3 million people think, it's going to be really boring here. You can't really do much here. But on the other hand, and you living in Berlin and me having lived in London for so many years, you realize that it has at least the work-life balance everyone is always talking about. You can actually do business in terms of hours, if it's 2 hours here or there, you don't really feel it. You can go out and see your friends. You can go to the lake. You can go to the seaside. The food is great. I mean, I can keep going on and on about it. But in terms of public relations and how we've been positioning ourselves, which is one of the biggest things, I think, is the fact that we actually have this work-life balance, which a lot of big cities like London, doesn't exist.
So, in comparison with other countries that regained their independence 30 years ago, I think there were altogether 16. Who do you think we can learn from as well, and who should improve maybe?
Definitely, I think if we talk about the Baltic states, right? So Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, I do think we are competing now a little bit more with Estonia and less with Latvia. And Estonia, it's a country of its own, it feels, and it's quite different in the way, they do things. What I find fascinating, because I work with startups a lot, is the number of unicorns that they have, right? The talent that's been growing so quickly. The fact that Estonia is so close to Scandinavia, I think what they've managed to do is they learned how to communicate the messaging quicker on international level. Whilst when I started working with some of the startups here, it was still kind of, baby steps, trying to figure out, what actually works abroad. Because a lot of things work really well on international market or on national market, right? In the local market, that's quite an easy part. But I think we're still trying to figure out how to communicate, business ideas, how to communicate our talent when it comes to wider audiences. And I do think that Estonia is doing a really, really good job.
Yes. So you mentioned fintech, you mentioned work-life balance. Where else are we? Tourism, yeah. What are the topics that we're not using yet, but maybe we should start thinking about?
Ooh, we have definitely a lot. It's really hard to pinpoint one or two. I do think that, we do have quite a few different, I guess, areas. So biotech is huge in Lithuania, but not as huge on the global market. So probably, you know that in certain areas, laser technology, Lithuania is being praised for it, but I do feel on an international level, not a lot of people know about that. But then there's certain topics that are harder to communicate, right? So fintech for the past, probably half a decade is a very sexy topic, right? Loads of people are doing that. Tourism, the way that, G-Spot campaign worked, and a few other really, really cool campaigns that municipality of Vilnius came up with, like the quirky ones, also quite easy, I think, to navigate, because people love to travel, they want to experience new cultures, and Lithuania is a hidden gem, right? So every single person that I meet, I also like, you should definitely visit Lithuania. It's amazing. We have great food, great weather, well, depending how you like it. But yeah, I think the bigger question would be how we exactly want to showcase ourselves to the world. Are we going to be doing, just tourism? Someone is in charge of that, just fintech, or, as something that we've discussed, going to be done on a grander scale, right? So the whole of the government. But from personal and professional experience, I feel that it's extremely, extremely difficult, because you have different parties involved, you have different agencies involved, there are different ministries involved, and every single one of them obviously is going to be pursuing their own agenda, because they have to deliver, right, locally, and sometimes maybe not necessarily, they may not necessarily have all the international goals. So kind of having the communications between all the players would be perfect, yet I think it's near mission impossible, and not only for Lithuania, for any other country.
You're right. Countries in the Western Europe, they sort of have the labels that come back centuries,
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's quite difficult just to decide that we're going to focus on one thing and then agree, because it comes with time. And
yeah. It not only comes with time, it also, as you said, it comes with years and years of things that have been happening. Like, I don't know, if you take the US, it's the American dream. It didn't happen, it didn't become American dream in like 20 to 30 years. It's this whole perception of, what people think of the US. And a lot of times I feel like when they actually go to the US, the American dream pretty much clashes, because, it's not exactly what you were expecting of it. But at the time, I think, considering that we're so young, we're a very young country, we have some fantastic young politicians that are seeing, the future, and they're forward thinking. at the moment, it's just a matter of, communicating it effectively and making sure that we compete, with giants, such as like, let's say, the UK and Germany and France. And as I mentioned, in terms of fintech, the fact that Lithuania, the country of less 3 million people, is number 2 in Europe, I think that is a huge win.
And we spoke with quite a few people who were emphasizing that, with the head of Invest Lithuania, with the board member of the Lithuanian Bank as well. And what they as well said that is missing maybe is the encouragement for foreigners to come and live in Lithuania. Do you think we can communicate that through the PR, or they need to come and then they will understand that this is the place for everybody to live together, not just Lithuanians who look the same and speak the same?
It's a funny one because, to be honest, I have a friend who's a journalist, and I've known her for years and years now, and she's never visited Lithuania. And it took me 4 years to pretty much force her, just say, like, you definitely need to come. I was like, it's going to be my 30th birthday. You need to come over because, it's amazing. And she bought the tickets with her partner, and obviously COVID happened and they can't come now. But it did take me, a few years of persuading her to come. And it's a funny one because people, I think, they still don't know exactly what to expect when they come here. Because in 2009, when I moved to the UK, people were, whenever they would ask me, so where are you from? I would say Lithuania, and they would have really, really hard time trying to even figure out where on the map that is. And obviously in 10 years, that has changed quite a lot because, we finally managed to find, I think, our spot and slowly kind of, keep hitting it to make sure that people know about us. In terms of living here, I think it's a great place to live. Once again, the work-life balance, you can work remotely if you feel like it. It's just the unknown, right? So if everyone knew for decades that London is the capital, for finance, and you have all those huge fancy buildings and the Queen lives there, it's kind of exciting. And a lot of people, I'll do that. But Lithuania, once again, we are very young. I think a lot of people don't really know, what they will do here. You try to explain them that we have a lot of really big companies and that potentially, you can get a job in one of those companies. It's just a matter, I think it will just take time. It will take time. I know a lot of foreigners in Lithuania, and I would never think, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, it was very surprising to me that they would come to Lithuania to live. And to be honest, whenever I would be asking that question, I would not really think why I'm asking that question. It's simply because 10 years ago, or like 15 years ago, once we joined the European Union, 16, I think now, everyone started moving out, right? Everyone went to the UK, and you had this free movement. It felt like it didn't feel like it's not the right country, but it felt like somewhere else you might have more opportunities. Whilst now I think we have the opportunities inside the country that we're slowly, developing and showcasing. What I find really fascinating is that those people that left together with me in 2009, now in 2020, they're slowly coming back. And we're not talking about, labor workers, whoever has been in the UK, for years. We're talking about people, who went there, they went to university, perhaps finished their masters, studied something else, MBA or something, MBA, sorry. They worked in really, really good companies, held very high positions, and absorbed that in international, I guess, experience that if maybe you live in Lithuania, like for your whole life, might be slightly harder to get. And what I see that those people are just coming back now and they're applying the knowledge that they've obtained. And it's fascinating to see the changes. Even with our PR agency, to be honest, if you would have asked me whether I'm planning to spend a lot of time in Lithuania once I got on my plane in 2009, I would probably say no. Because at the time, Lithuania, for my aspirations and a huge ego, seemed a little bit too small. But now when we figure out that there is a huge gap in the market for what we do and, the experience that we bring and explain people and especially, entrepreneurs and young startups how to communicate the messaging. Why not? I wouldn't have been able to do that if I would have stayed, let's say in Lithuania. Now I feel like I'm bringing something back and really can help out, which is a huge thing.
So what was that tipping point or the occasion when you understood that maybe it's the time?
Well, I've been reading in the news that Lithuania is number 2 for fintech. And I was like, this is interesting. No, to be honest, I always loved coming back. I'm looking at my Facebook timeline, when you get those memories, and probably once in like half a year, I'd always see that I have like 10 days till I come back home, because Lithuanian Vilnius is always my home, regardless the country I might be living in. When it came, as you said, the tipping point, why did we decide to work more with Lithuanians? We work a lot with Latvians as well, is we saw that the talent in terms of public relations that we have here and agencies, they're fantastic, right? They do amazing job. But the thing is, once you're in the local market, you have big boys coming to you wanting to do PR in the local market. Hence the reason I see that a lot of them might be lacking experience and knowledge of how to do PR abroad. So we predominantly work in English-speaking countries. Another thing is that startups are like a whole new breed. So up until I started working with startups in 2015, I've been working with like very big companies. It was a very different type of PR I was doing. So when you're trying to apply, I don't know what, let's say Rimi in Lithuania would be doing, it will never work for a small startup of like 3 people. So we saw that, and I started chatting to a lot of people, a lot of different communities that we'd had here, the ones that had small businesses or medium businesses, and they said, we really want to do something in the UK. However, we just don't know how. We can't find anyone who can help us out. And, just from starting this conversation, and I was giving out my advice free of charge, and, I'm still doing loads of talks, trying to educate people on what public relations area is, how to do it. And we saw that, as I said, like not a lot of people do that in Lithuania. So that would be a waste if we wouldn't do that.
Yeah, so you became a big fish in a small pond, and now educating.
I think we're still, I do consider us a small fish in a relatively large pond. The reason is, I think in Lithuania, everyone has their own niche. We can't say that we don't have competitors ever. We don't have many competitors in the UK because we focus on certain, type of companies. But also I think I'm on my personal mission to educate what PR is, because some of the practices I saw in Eastern Europe and predominantly in the Baltics were pretty shocking. And I know that, people were paying a lot of money for that and just getting something that is, I can't say a scam. Well, I guess it was a scam type of thing. And because I have very strong ethics of what PR in journalism should be, I thought that it's extremely unfair of someone, wasting thousands and thousands of euros or pounds on something that is not bringing the value that it should. So yeah, that's the reason, I'm doing a load of talks. And I always love to explain people that, public relations is not marketing, it's not advertising. But it's a long way to go. Even in the UK, it is a long way to go.
So what were those practices? The I don't know how it's in English, some kind of a PR magic that doesn't happen that you saw?
Overnight success doesn't happen. Let's start with that. And even though I love people thinking that PR is a very fun and sexy and exciting industry to be in, and that everything happens miraculously, and unfortunately it doesn't. And to be able to succeed, it takes a lot of time, a lot of efforts, and a lot of great ideas. I think the biggest difference between scams and real PR is that real PR will have an impact. So there are 2 ways I think that things can be done. One, if we're talking about scams, I guess, you have a press release, it can be written okay, and you send it out via news wires, and you have big publications reprinting it. It's not public relations, it's not journalism, it's something that you paid for, And, those big publications just literally copy pasted it. It has zero impact. It has zero value, but it's on a fancy big, website and media outlet. And that is wrong on numerous levels. I think that, first of all, it's a lazy job and should not be done. And secondly, just, it's unethical. And on the other hand, you have relationships with journalists that you've been nourishing for, months, with some of them for years. It's the story that you've been working on for quite a long time, to make sure that it has an impact, right? So, for example, saying that Lithuania is number 2 in fintech and having a press release reprinted everywhere is great, but it doesn't really do anything. But explaining the reasons why Lithuania is number 2 in fintech, what does it mean? Recently, the piece came out that also Lithuania has quite a lot of female executives in fintech, which is also quite rare in Europe. And I think we're behind Spain only. So, all those things that matter on a whole different level. And that is what good PR is, but it does not happen, just like that.
So just coming back to Lithuania.
Yeah.
For me, it's very interesting to watch sometimes Lithuanian TV, because the Lithuanians who live abroad, they have just one image, and that image is not great. And
really?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's, I have seen on the different TV channels, they were, talking about the fact that all Lithuanians who go abroad, they basically work in a factory. And I was thinking, have you noticed this? And why do you think sometimes the media is trying, even in Lithuania, to show that people who leave the country, they're not the best people?
It goes back to the fact that sells, right? So everyone is more likely to watch news about someone doing, like we say, dirty job instead of someone being successful. And that's not only in Lithuania, I think people just prefer reading bad news and stuff. What was surprising though is when this whole COVID started happening, and I was reading some comments on social media about Lithuanians coming back from abroad, regardless whether it was UK or not. And some of the comments were so mean, saying, well, you should just stay there and, don't bring the virus here. And this is, so wrong. Why did you decide to come here years and years later? And it's very sad that some people have that perception. I do think that maybe in terms of local media, there's not enough, success stories of people actually coming from the UK, coming from France, coming from Germany, and, do really well in Lithuania. Not only that, in fact, I don't know, they earn thousands, probably not millions, and praising themselves, but actually helping, let's say, Lithuanian talent to get somewhere. And it's sad because it feels like there's a division, isn't there? It's either you hate foreigners, because I do feel sometimes as a foreigner when I'm here, or you kind of love them. But then again, those who love you are probably the ones that's been living abroad for a very long time. It's sad that they try to portray us as, the ones who work in a factory. I mean, people do work in factories. I see nothing shameful in that. It is not a bad job. It's not worse than, let's say, being a CEO or something. It doesn't matter by the end of the day what kind of job do you do. It really doesn't. By the end of the day, you're a human being, and if someone is working in the factory 24/7 to support their family, to raise children, well done them. It's much better than a 20-year-old pretended CEO living off parents' money and being extremely successful. So there's a bit of a, as I said, I think it feels that there should be shame in having a low-skill job, when I don't really know why people think that it should be the case. Because people are working, earning money, as a providing for the families, and this whole kind of judgment, they go into the UK, work in the factories, picking fruit. There's nothing bad about that. Nothing bad. It's very easy to sit on the couch and tell how people should live their lives, or like talking to someone and saying the way the country should be governed without having the necessary experience, because it does feel very black and white. that, oh, someone is working in a factory means that, they're not very smart or they couldn't get another job or something. But it's never just black and white. It's never, you never know what situations people were in, the reasoning why they decided to do that. And also it's not that easy, to create certain laws and, make sure that people live in certain ways. So but it's easy, as I said, to tell very nasty things, on Facebook when no one can can talk back to you.
So why do you think black and white sell so well, and how can we sell the good things?
I always say that black news and bad news, they sell better because it's a human nature. Let's say if the fire somewhere, if there's, I don't know, suicides, we are more likely to click on that because we might not be very happy with our lives, and seeing that something bad is going on in the rest of the world, or even in our own country, makes sometimes us feel a little bit better to a degree. I don't know if a lot of people, let's say, would read about grandma planting trees for a better future. Probably it would be just somewhere out there, and people are like, well done, you grandma. That would be about it. It's we can't really change the human nature. What we can do though is educate. Educate. I will never stop saying that. So people would know that it's not only black and white, right? There's a lot of gray in the middle. And if you're extremely pro Brexit, probably you should start reading different type of news. If you are extremely pro Trump, and whenever you see rallies and what's happening, that probably you should try and be a little bit more open-minded. But then open-mindedness does not happen overnight, right? So that goes down to culture, that goes down to our habits. Selling good news, well then the question is, what is good news, right? So is it the fact that the country or startup has earned and got a certain type, I don't know, £5 million or something? Is that good news? Some people say it's good news. Other people say, well, they're scammers, probably they stole it from somewhere. Saying that Lithuania is perfect for tourism, the controversy we had with G-Spot. Some people said that it's fantastic because you get a lot of young people, being interested, and it's quirky. Older generation said, oh no, we're trying to sell, sex tourism, which is also kind of, why would you even think about sex tourism, right? So it's the connotations that you have. It's impossible to just sell good news, same as it's impossible to just keep selling bad news. But it goes down to the consumer choice, right? So what we were talking about, if you read one type of newspaper every single day for like 15 years, it's going to be a very long way back trying to subtract that and for you to start thinking differently. That's why whenever I talk to someone, I read Daily Mail sometimes. That is my guilty pleasure, and that is horrible and very embarrassing that it will be on record now forever. But they do have some sort of ridiculous gossip, and you do see how they portrayed foreigners, how they portrayed the royal family there. And then I love reading Financial Times, where they have real good quality journalism. So it kind of I'm trying to stay balanced and know exactly what is happening.
But do you think there is a value of reading, like, for example, I see myself as liberal, and I say, okay, liberal values, this is modernity, this is something we need to have, same-sex marriage, or, equality between, genders is very important. But then there are people who disagree, and there are articles about it, even at home. And sometimes I feel, bad and angry why people think that way. But Absolutely. Then I think, okay, is it this person is like a person who is adult and who has this opinion? And how should we react, or should we listen? And how should we listen to a different opinion?
I am so with you on this one. I always get mad whenever I see certain things that go against my values. But then my values were predominantly created by living abroad, where a lot of things that might be slightly abnormal in Eastern Europe are completely normal in the Western world. Listening to opinions is good when they're within reason. right? Same goes to criticism. As long as it's constructive criticism, saying, I disagree with this because X, Y, Z, but not just because, that is simply my personal preference of, not seeing same-sex marriage. Hello, we are kind of, we moved on in life so much, and, we can't just stay behind and have these absolutely crazy, in my mind, ideas that, someone can feel like that. But then if you see what kind of people say those things, those are not the people that are exposed to a variety of cultures, right? That's the reason, for example, why London is so welcoming, because you do have all sorts of people there and everyone does whatever they want to. And if you go somewhere like on the outskirts and like in small towns where there are no foreigners, they have their own ideas. Same goes to Lithuania. I think that Vilnius is quite multicultural, I guess. But you have the older generation that is so much used to a certain set of rules that it's almost impossible to go against. Listening to them, no. Giving them the platform to try and enforce the ideas is probably not a great idea. But then again, any sort of idea, regardless how liberal it is, that is being kind of force-fed, of course, it will have a lot of controversy. I am a person who thinks that every opinion should exist, but not every opinion, should be fed to the masses. And especially right now, the world is changing so drastically. A couple of years ago, I didn't think that Brexit would happen. I didn't think that Trump would happen. And those are quite significant political events. And, obviously when Brexit and Trump were happening, France almost had their crazy, crazy government. Same goes to Austria. But we're going back to the same thing. It's educating. People can have their opinions. Don't enforce those opinions. And I think what is also important is to respect opinions of other people. And if somewhat, you're thinking differently because, you lived abroad for a long time, it has to be respected. But when it comes to very controversial ideas, I guess, I think it's the older generation that just can't come to terms with certain things that, you and I are so much like, yeah, whatever, that's fine, whatever happens.
Well, the example from Poland shows that even young people can become very polarized, and they can go on one way or another. And, knowing that in Poland now, the abortion is the thing of discussion. It's quite crazy thinking that Europe is sort of shifting from one idea to another. And how do you think the PR or communications can help to solve this problem and open up the dialogue and say, okay?
It's a hard one in terms of public relations, because then you have to, I think, a lot of people just try to monetize on certain things, which is a little bit evil to a degree. In terms of public relations, of course, having a discussion and having a platform is important, giving that platform to numerous people with different ideas. But then it just going back to the fact that those ideas should be respected, and also their limitations to what, should be said and shouldn't be said. Let's say when it comes to abortion, that you have Catholic countries that say like, oh no, it's a sin. Then you have people, women saying that's my body, I should do whatever I want to. Yet you have crazy people standing outside abortion clinics saying that you're killing a baby and stuff. There's certain very, I think, delicate areas where PR probably would not be the best tool, to try to enforce certain things. It should be more on the governmental level, I guess, opening this conversation and hearing out different people. What I think does help, regardless how sensitive the issue is being multicultural and quite diverse. Because if you know different people, if you are indulging different countries and different points of view, that helps you to be less judgmental. So, if someone wants to have an abortion, that is not my decision, and if they feel that they should do that, off they go. And I think that comes once again after being surrounded by so many different people with so many different opinions and then decisions. By the end of the day, it's each on their own. So you can have look at, I don't know, let's take the US and Trump's campaign, right? It's been absolutely ridiculous. I don't think even Trump thought that he will win this race. And and now we live in a very weird world, I guess. And it was a mix of PR and marketing, and Cambridge Analytica came into place, and all sorts of weird factors. The question is whether Clinton should have done a better job at having a better PR campaign. But PR has its value. PR has a lot of impact, and it can create the way we see the world. Yet it goes back to every single person making their own decisions. Someone just didn't like Hillary Clinton because she was a woman. What kind of PR campaign can you do, can you create to kind of enforce someone to thinking, well, probably she's as good as a guy? I think there's a lot of very sensitive topics that should be opened up, but we need to be mature enough to be able to listen to each other and to draw some sort of conclusions, which is very rare.
So what is your dream, your personal dream for Lithuania for the next decades?
I think Lithuania right now is on the right path to establish itself in the world. And, as I've mentioned before, we probably found our sweet spot. What I wish we would know better and learn what to do better in the upcoming, probably not decades, more like years, is to understand how we should communicate on an international level. That's one thing. And also how to communicate internally, because we can, praise ourselves locally, and this is fantastic. But, when we're looking at the bigger picture, that's not enough. So sometimes we need to maybe take a step back, evaluate what we're doing, how we're doing that, compare, what, let's say, big players are doing, Germany, US, the UK, what we can adapt, and learn how we can do things better, because obviously the competition is fierce worldwide. But I do think we've reinvented ourselves. We definitely reinvented ourselves in the last decade. And I am extremely proud to be Lithuanian. I'm extremely proud to be from Lithuania. And whenever I go somewhere and talk to people, I'm always saying that, that is a hidden gem. You should see it before it gets flooded by tourists.
Thank you for such an uplifting vision for Lithuania. I hope it's gonna come true, because communication is the secret for countries and for the teams.
For anyone, like literally anything, communication is the key.
Thanks to everyone who helped us with our podcast recording, to Vytautė Rimkutė, who takes care of the interviews, as well as to Sean Donovan, who is our editor-in-chief, and our designer, Milda Sukyte. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as check out our new website with incredibly well done designs, and subscribe to our newsletter, which will deliver new episodes straight to your inbox.